Libraries are a bit weird. No matter where you live in the world or how long you've been there, when you wander into a library, you're not just stepping into a place. You're opening a categorized zone of infinite times, locations, cooking instructions, photographs, musings, maps, medical journals, good poetry, bad poetry, and adventure. Few places carry with them a sense of universal wonder. From an early age, Daniel Handler felt at home in a library. It was a feeling he later recognized in stories from others who had fallen in love with their passion at first sight.
I recognize it when I read about people the first time they hold a musical instrument in their hands, or the first time they enter a ballpark, or the first time they go to the restaurant that their family runs or something like that they understand that there's a place for them there and that's what they want to participate in. I really wanted to participate in the conversation of literature.
With the drive sunk deep into his bones, Daniel set out on a journey that would launch his name on the library bookshelves around the globe.
Hello, I am Daniel Handler, often known as Lemony Snicket, and I make up things and write them down.
I'm Doug Frazier, and this is What We Do, where we'll meet the people behind the most intriguing passions, hobbies, and jobs around the world. You sang opera as a kid?
I did. I had a beautiful soprano voice until puberty wrecked my career, and I had to find something else to do.
Change your career path.
Yeah. My parents like to say that they considered castration in order to keep my soprano voices. But I think in the long run, secondary sex characteristics have been a better choice for me than a lifelong career as a soprano.
Daniel's millions of readers would agree. In fact, his life not as a soprano has been so successful, he's been able to make a living purely off his writing. The truth is, most authors have second or even third jobs to make ends meet.
So much of being an artist in this world is figuring out where your next meal is going to come from.
But we can't look at the story of Daniel Handler without peering into the life of Daniel's literary alter ego, Lemony Snicket.
The popularity of the Lemony Snicket books have had such a profound effect on me in removing that part of the equation of being an artist. I always thought I would, at best, be some strange cultish writer that a few kind of shy introverts would have some appreciation for, because so many of the writers who are important to me are not what anyone would call famous writers.
Under the pen name Lemony Snicket, Daniel wrote the middle grade book series called A Series of Unfortunate Events. It follows the tale of the three Baudelaire children whose parents die in a tragic fire and leave behind a massive inheritance. That fortune and the lives of the three Baudelaire orphans are put at risk when a scheming thespian by the name of Count Olaf seeks to become their legal guardian in order to steal their inheritance. Since its debut 20 years ago, the series has sold over 60 million copies, been turned into a movie starring Jim Carrey.
I am your beloved Count Olaf.
And most recently was adapted into a 3-season Netflix series on which Daniel was a co-writer.
When the sand runs out, that fortune is mine. I didn't realize the sand went so quickly. I bought it online. You're gonna need to flip it a couple of times.
Do you remember the first story that you ever made up?
In the first grade, we had these sheets of paper where about the top third was an empty space to do a picture in, and then you could write a story in the remaining probably 2 sentences of space that they gave you, given how large you write at that age. And I wrote one about an egg and what it liked to listen to on the radio. When you're a child and you have an imagination, you're kind of constantly making up a story.
That state of being happens long before we learn to actually write any of it down. We're simply absorbing everything around us and reshaping it into micro-narratives in our head. Small flashes of a growing mind at work. When Daniel could hardly read or write, his dad bundled him up in a coat, and together they strolled down their neighborhood street.
When I was very little, my father would take an evening walk with me at what felt like a dark and mysterious hour, but being as the library was open, it was probably 5:30 or something. And we would go to the library together, and he would leave me alone in the children's section where there was a good librarian to help me. And then as I grew older, I would just walk there by myself.
Now old enough to explore the wonders of the youth section alone, Daniel was swept up in stories that captivated his budding imagination. Until one day, when a gatekeeper approached him and showed him how much bigger the world of books actually was.
I have a very clear memory of the children's librarian at the West Portal branch in San Francisco taking me by the hand and leading me to the adult section, saying, "It's time for you to be here now."
Libraries have played a key role in Daniel's journey and often show up as settings in his books. But in today's changing world, libraries are finding it increasingly difficult to stay relevant.
If you tried to pitch a library now, because if you didn't have public libraries and you tried to pitch them, no one would take that idea. And so you can't believe it still exists when so many public forums and infrastructure is gone from this country and certainly under threat or kind of being slowly worn away by the juggernaut of corporate capitalism. But a library still retains a certain kind of integrity and scope that's really quite amazing.
It's that idea Daniel muses on here in his song called Without Libraries.
We are born, and we're not smart, and our parents kind of try to do their part, but our brains, they need some facts, so our education starts in the public stacks. Without libraries, we'd be dumb. We wouldn't know our elbow from our bum. Libraries are our friends, we should take good care of them, because without libraries we'd be D-U-M.
Now, when you were a kid in the library, did you ever think to yourself, when I'm an adult, I want to be a writer?
That's really all I thought. It was always something I wanted to be. I don't remember a time that I didn't want to be a writer. It was certainly made clear to me by all sorts of people that was a ridiculous dream in terms of earning a living. But that was always what I wanted to be.
Has the reality of being a writer lived up to your childhood expectations?
Well, because of the just ridiculous luck that has fallen upon me like a water balloon, kind of yes. I mean, I spend a great deal of my time sitting at a desk and making things up and writing it down, which is kind of your vision of a writer. I think other people have a vision of a writer that you get to wear a black turtleneck and are asked your opinion on various world matters. And that was never part of my fantasy. My fantasy was, I hope people leave me alone and let me make up things.
The title of writer bears a certain whimsy, but the title of published author carries with it a prestige. There's validation for many writers when a publisher recognizes the quality of their work and says, "I believe your ideas are worthy of being printed." A poet himself, Daniel wanted to give unknown poets a chance to have their words in print, an idea hatched on the set of Netflix's A Series of Unfortunate Events. Daniel spent time in the Toronto warehouses where the series was filmed, offering insights when needed, but generally just hanging around.
Well, when we were filming the Netflix series, and when I say we, I mean a bunch of people, but not me.
Just you.
Yeah. Well, I think that can be clear because I was invited to the set, and it's a very strange experience to walk on to a set that people have built and who are running around working very hard, finishing and using because of some things that you wrote down a long time ago. Everyone on the set seemed very charming and they were all working very hard, but their interest in meeting me was minimal at best. You know, they had a whole lot of work to do.
Yeah.
They were trying to make sure that the shadow cast by the fake tree didn't interfere with what was going on over here or something. And, you know, they didn't want to have me say, you know where I got the idea for this? That's not interesting to them. And so I was on the set and mostly useless, even though I had written a lot of the scripts and I'd worked with a lot of the writers on the scripts. It was just fascinating to see it all work. But one of the weird aspects of it was that every day I would be given a per diem. I would be given a small amount of cash, which in some situations they give people. So you can go get a sandwich and not save the receipt and bill back Netflix for your stupid sandwich that you had while you were working. They just give you some money. Go and spend it any way you want.
The per diem wasn't of much use to Daniel for two reasons. The first is the set was already stockpiled with food. The second was the American cash he received wasn't any good. They were filming in Vancouver after all, So each day, he took the envelope of money back to his hotel room. Those envelopes he would take and tuck inside a larger envelope.
And before you know it, I had what looked like a prop from Miami Vice or something. I had a huge pile of cash. I mean, cash in a hotel room feels like even skeezier, even more suspect. And I just didn't know what to do with it.
He saw all the money that was being spent on the show, and some of it was already going back to him, even though he'd already been paid for his work. That's when the idea hit him. He'd start a small press and publish some poetry chapbooks. He made an announcement online and called for open submissions.
I remember that I had this fantasy that I would get a small number of submissions and I would spend one day, I said, I'll just make a big pot of coffee and curl up on the sofa and read all this beautiful poetry and I won't decide how to read. And instead it was in this huge box, like a refrigerator box almost. Because I remember it did feel kind of like a coffin sometimes, like the cheapest coffin you could possibly get. I was just completely at sea for kind of the first month. I thought, what have I done? I will say this with the understanding that we all know how the culture works and how most of everything produced in any line of work that you can think of is terrible. So obviously most of the poetry that I received was terrible. A lot of it was good, but most of it was terrible.
Over a period of months, he'd take a handful of the poems each day to a local cafe.
And I would read a few and try not to be overwhelmed by despair.
He wound up choosing 3 winners to publish in the chapbooks, printed by his new company, Per Diem Press.
It just felt like a great thing to do. It felt really fun. I remember when there was a little announcement, some executive at Netflix said, "So do you mean to tell me that we are also now producing chapbooks, that Netflix makes movies, television, and chapbooks?" And I said, yeah, I don't know why it's not a major part of your advertising right now to talk about these 3 poets rather than, the 10,000 television shows that you're making.
Daniel is up for doing it again on one condition. He needs to find a different process that won't take him months to go through the submissions. That process he despises is the exact process an agent went through to discover Daniel in the first place. When he started submitting his work to agents, he was part of the many manuscripts that the agents receive, affectionately known as the slush pile. At this point in his career, after having published multiple middle grade book series, several children's picture books, and 7 novels, Daniel no longer has to worry about the slush pile. In fact, when you visit a library, you'll see the name Daniel Handler or Lemony Snicket written across over 30 book spines. In his latest novel, Bottle Grove, Daniel taps into his trademark wit and insights to explore the highs, lows, and humdrums of marriage.
I just reached an age where the first people I knew who got married were getting divorced. One thing when a marriage falls apart is that you usually get way more stories about it than you do when people are together. And the stories revealed the deep diversity of expectations and realities in people's marriages. And I think because marriage was being debated nationally, what is the meaning of marriage and what does it mean? And can we change it in this way? And I was, of course, in favor of gay marriage, and I never thought that heterosexuality should be some specialized category for this. But I was really struck by the deep diversity in marriages that I knew, which were both same-sex and opposite sex. I was also wandering around my hometown of San Francisco, and I was watching San Francisco change, and as the romantic and nuptial landscapes of people I knew changed, and to watch San Francisco change as well, it all became to be part of the same story. There are 2 marriages in Bottle Grove that are chronicled. One of them is basically a romantic one, and the other one is more opportunistic, or for money, as people now say scornfully, and who said totally unscornfully for most of the history of marriage. And I got interested in thinking about 2 couples and what might happen to them. You finish a book and then you let it out in the world. And when you hear from anyone that they've read it, it feels like a miracle.
With Bottle Grove now out in the world, it takes its place in the fiction section of countless local libraries. It's but one of tens of thousands, in some cases millions, of books poised to have their pages opened and their stories once again brought to life by a curious mind.
I remember really understanding, anyone can come in here. Everybody is interested in something different. And a book that is the last book I would be reading, like a book in Mandarin on how to get a passport, is a very crucial text to someone over here. And that lesson of the scope of literature and the scope of reading was really important to me.
Daniel adds another layer to that scope with the publication of Bottle Grove, and one more book to his contribution to the conversation of literature.
And then we die, and that's the end. At the funeral, there'll be one loyal friend, and he'll get up, remove his cap. But where will he find a poem that isn't utter crap? Yes, without libraries we'd be dumb. We wouldn't know our elbow from our bum. Libraries are our friends, we should take good care of them, because without libraries we'd be D-U-M. Yes, without libraries we'd be dumb. It's true. We wouldn't know our elbow from our bum. Libraries are our friends, we should take good care of them, because without libraries we'd be D-U-M.
Hey, it's Doug. Thanks so much for listening. When you get a chance, would you mind leaving a rating and review for the show? It only takes a few seconds and it's a huge help. There are a ton of fun episodes coming up, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any. Until next time, stay curious.
What We Do with Doug Frazier is distributed by WHRV for WHRO Public Media.